Hi, welcome. My name is James Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of Bike Delaware and the lead volunteer for AARP Delaware. In particular, AARP's work on livable communities is the area that I work in. I work with staff and other volunteers to expand choices for people as we age. A lot of people think that our choices get narrower and narrower, but we think that our choices should get greater and greater as we age, because we believe that community should be designed for everybody, no matter our age, no matter our abilities. We should be able to get around at every age and no matter our ability. In Delaware, though, it can often be very challenging to get around without a car. Whether you need to get to the doctor, you need to shop for food, or you just want to visit friends. The assumption for many, many years among government officials is that we're going to design our communities to make it so that getting to all those places we need to go just requires a car. And that's a problem for people no matter your age, but it's particularly a problem for us as we age, because on average, for men, we live about 6 years beyond the point where we can drive. And for women who live longer, it's even longer. It's about 10 years. So this panel is going to be focused mostly on bicycling, because bicycling is part of the puzzle, to make those communities work for people of every age and ability, to work for people who can no longer drive safely or who are too young to drive safely on the other opposite end of the spectrum. It's definitely a part of that puzzle. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about some recent things we've been doing this year, and then I'm going to quickly move to our panelists, who are the point of this thing. I'm just the moderator. This year, there were a couple of really interesting pieces of legislation that passed or are sort of moving towards passage. The first was something we call the Delaware Yield. That makes it legal for a cyclist to treat a stop sign as a yield sign. Delaware in 2017 passed a temporary version of that, a contingent version of that, to see if it raised any issues. And in fact, it not only did it not cause any issues, it actually turned out that after Delaware made that lawful, crashes involving bicyclists at stop signs fell by 20%. So Bike Delaware and AARP Delaware worked with Representative Mitchell and Senator Sokola, and just 3 or 4 days ago, Governor Carney signed House Bill 121 into law. So the Delaware Yield is now a permanent part of the law. And since Delaware did that in 2017, 7 other states have followed in our footsteps. And so we're really proud about that, not just in Delaware, but nationally. Another thing that we worked on with AARP Delaware is the electric bicycle legislation. So electric bicycles are just an increasingly popular thing. They're great, again, for people no matter what your age. They're something that are great for people with some disabilities. They can really allow you to get back on a bike, and they are, if you're riding with your spouse, she's much stronger rider than you are, you can get an electric bike and keep up with her. You can go farther distances. If you live in a hilly area, they're awesome to get up hills. Again, especially as you get older. They're just wonderful from all points of view. So that bill is still moving through the legislature, but we're really optimistic that we will have an electric bicycle bill moving ahead. Now there's something really, really important. Last thing I'm going to mention before we move on to the panelists, the Amish Country Bike Tour Virtual Edition. You can see I can see down there, I assume everybody else can, this little red thing at the bottom of the screen. That's open until the end of October. It's a virtual version of the Amish Country Bike Tour, which was just last Saturday, but this one allows you to sort of ride it virtually. And thanks to AARP, if you use the special code, which again I think is coming down there on the bottom, it's totally free. So you can sign up and ride the virtual edition of the Amish Country Bike Tour. If you like the virtual edition of the Amish Country Bike Tour and you've never ridden in the actual non-virtual version, maybe next year you'll sign up for the non-virtual version. Okay, so that's a quick introduction. just to orient folks, but the point here is to move on quickly to our panelists. The first panelist today is Leah Casanda, who is a senior planner. She has worked for the city of Wilmington. She is now working for an engineering firm that works all over the state of Delaware. And I'll just mention one other remarkable thing about Leah, which is that she has not owned a car for 7 years, which I find inspiring, both inspiring and admirable. Leah?
Thank you, James. Yes, I am a planner. The primary focus of my work is active transportation planning. And what active transportation planning is active ways of moving through the world. So walking, biking, and even how that relates to taking transit or that kind of thing. So we're here today to focus on Sussex County in Delaware. And Sussex County is a very special place. It holds our gems of resort communities, Lewis and Rehoboth Beach, and also arguably is probably two of the most bike-friendly places in the state. There is a very robust trail network connecting both places. And if I could jump into some of the photographs I have of that trail network, that would be great. And as James said, I've not owned a car for over 7 years now. And, I love it when I have the opportunity to use a nice trail network on my commute or on my way to the grocery store because, it's very safe. It's very low stress. It feels great. I don't need to worry about cars passing me or any of those issues. So, but we can't connect everywhere with trails. And the reason for that is, pretty obvious, right? There's a lot of development that's already happened that prevents some of those connections from happening. So, as a transportation planner, what we like to do now is really look at opportunities to increase connectivity between places and how we can do that in a way that does feel safe for people, whether, adult riding with their child or, as we get older and maybe are less secure on bikes. Here we go. Some great images of some kids riding with their families down on the trails between Lewis and Rehoboth. What that means for us from, the ages we see on the screen all the way through our senior years. Now, when you get into the beach towns, this is a shot of downtown Rehoboth, Delaware. Folks continue to use their bikes, right? And that's probably folks who may not use their bikes to get around when they're at home, but when they come down to the beaches on vacation, they realize that biking can be a faster way to get around than driving. And part of the reason for that, if we could jump to the next image, is the road connecting Lewis and Rehoboth is Route 1. And it is quite a beast of a road, right? Let's count in this image. We only have 4 lanes here, but for portions of the roadway, it goes up to 6 lanes across. There's a lot of conflicting turning movements. And earlier, I mentioned the concept of low stress travel. And obviously that pathway was a great instance, but when we look at a corridor like this, it creates a very real barrier for people who live on one side of Route 1, getting across to access those low stress trails on the other side and vice versa. It also prevents people who maybe are living or vacationing in the beach towns from getting out to Route 1 to access a number of really great businesses because traffic will be backed up from people coming in and out of the beach communities on the weekends. And you can imagine, put yourself in the shoes of a cyclist or even a pedestrian trying to cross the street. It is extremely uncomfortable and unsafe. And fortunately, we live in a state where our Department of Transportation, DelDOT, has realized this is an issue that needs to be addressed. So we are actually working with them to identify how we can make the Route 1 corridor more bike friendly. If you could. And the next slide shows a technique we use. And you see a bunch of different colors associated with roadways on this map. So right down diagonally through your screen, you'll see a red line. And that's Route 1. And it's red because it's very stressful. There's a methodology we use called level of traffic stress that basically allows us to calculate how stressful a road is based on things like how many lanes there are, how many cars are traveling along it, what the speeds of that traffic is, and things like that. So we were able, working with our colleagues at DelDOT, to kind of look at how stressful the road network is. And you'll see kind of off those streets, you see a lot of purple lines, that pale lavender color. And what those represent are kind of the parking lots and service roads that connect businesses along the corridor. Now, oftentimes, some of those parking lots are really crazy and stressful with cars, but sometimes those corridors can be really neat little shortcuts for people who are trying to access businesses if they're walking or biking. And you'll also see dark green lines, and those mostly correspond with neighborhood streets. And the really cool thing about this level of traffic stress assessment is that it tells us, we may not need a bike lane or bike facility on those dark green, low stress streets because they're already very low speed, very low volume. I think we've all been in communities where it's pretty comfortable to wheel your car out the front door and ride with your kids around the neighborhood. Now, the problem becomes when we're looking at using our bikes for transportation is how do you get from one side to the other, right? Because you can bike out your front door, but then you're stuck in that island of green, low stress streets. So this study, if you could hit the next slide for me, is, here's a conceptual diagram, which is Route 1 runs down the middle, and that ladder kind of represents our vision for developing low stress streets. So kind of a parallel route on either side of Route 1. And, I would love for it to be as clean and simple as this diagram shows, but we're analyzing all those street networks and figuring out where we can thread a parallel route along each side of Route 1, and then periodic crossings over Route 1, where we can create safe connections that riders of all ages and abilities will feel comfortable using, both to access destinations along Route 1 and destinations, within the resort communities themselves. I know we have a huge number of seniors retiring to the beach communities and a huge amount of development. So, the recommendations of this study will be implemented in a variety of ways, some likely by the state of Delaware. And then others, as development occurs, the county and state work with those developers to implement improvements, not only to help keep vehicular traffic moving, but also to help accommodate bikes and people walking. So thank you, James.
Thank you, Leah. I think I'd just like to stay with Route 1 and that area for just a minute and maybe get one or two more thoughts from you. So, as you said, the trail network around Lewis it's spectacular and still growing. The Lewis, I think we don't actually have the numbers to know for sure, but just sort of anecdotally and visually, there's just an enormous number of people riding in the Lewis area and on that trail network, and people of every age and every ability, seniors, kids, little tiny kids. It's just been a remarkable success, and people in the area are passionate about that trail network, about making sure that it's well maintained and suggesting improvements. If you live in a little development, it's a quarter mile away, you've got people clamoring to be tied into that network. But Leah, you're talking about something which is a mile outside of it's outside. It's not in municipal Lewis or municipal road, but this is unincorporated Sussex County, and I think it's fair to say that there's not quite as much passion about making this area safer for cycling, even though that stretch of road, as you know, is the most dangerous road for bicycling in the entire state of Delaware. Literally, like a couple of dozen of crashes on that 7 miles, like every year. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that sounds about right, James. And I think there is motivation to address that issue. Hence, the fact that we are working on this great study right now. But as far as public sentiment, I think one great thing about providing better bike connections and better pedestrian connections is that there are other benefits, right? So although a member of the public may not be an avid cyclist or particularly inclined to use these issues, the business community is going to benefit from better bike connectivity. They're going to benefit from better pedestrian connectivity. A lot of folks who work in some of these places maybe don't have access to a car. So they're really reliant on a combination of transit, walking, and biking. In addition, we have a situation, as I mentioned earlier, where traffic volumes are so bad right now that it is actually faster for a person, if during a Friday night trying to get into the beaches, it is faster for someone on bike to ride the trail between Lewis and Rehoboth than to drive on Route 1. So there are things that are kind of outside forces that are pushing people in the direction of really looking at bikes a little differently, I think, than we have in years past. And there's also, short trips are a huge part of what happens at the beach. So, people drive down on those Fridays and Saturdays, they end up in their shore homes, and then they park their cars and they use their bikes to get around. And the more we as transportation professionals can replace short car trips, so I'm talking less than 3 miles, less than 1 mile in some instances, with a bike ride, the less pressure we have on that corridor as far as traffic volumes, and the safer it's going to become, right? So it's going to take a combination of providing more bike and pedestrian infrastructure, as well as kind of slowing vehicular speeds and safety improvements to change things. As a planner, as you well know, we work in pretty long time horizons. So we're not saying this is going to be overnight, but this we'll be working to kind of improve things over time, incrementally down at the beaches to address, as you correctly identified, a pretty big safety problem.
Thank you, Leah. We might return to this because I think it's so important. I think the work you're doing is just so important. But let's bring in our second panelist. Make sure to bring him into the conversation. Our second panelist is Scott Hoffman. He is the chair of the Delaware Bicycle Council and a civil planner. He has lived he works. So he's the chair of the Delaware Bicycle Council, is your state commission. In his normal non-Delaware Bicycle Council life, he is a civil engineer. He has grown up and lived his entire life in the state of Delaware. Scott, can you tell us what is the Delaware Bicycle Council?
Yeah, James. So the council is a governor-appointed committee, and that committee includes representatives from several state agencies. They include DelDOT, Department of Health and Social Services, the Office of Highway Safety, the state police, and even the Department of Education. And then there's, along with those agencies, a group of private citizen members. And when people ask what the point of the council is, I think the answer is that overall our mission is to help guide policies in Delaware regarding cycling. So we try to bring all these people together to have a discussion about issues that everybody thinks are important about cycling.
So I think that I believe the impetus for the project that Leah Casanda is working on was originally from the Delaware Bicycle Council. The Delaware Bicycle Council said, coastal highway has been, people have been arguing about coastal highway for 20 years, and arguably it's no better than it was 20 years ago. And the Delaware Bicycle Council said, we need to look at this. We need to look outside the box. And I think that is a good illustration of the value that the council can play.
That's right. So we actually saw a lot of folks. So one of the things that we do during the meetings is we have a public input period. And we actually had several people come in and talk about specific incidences that had happened on the road section that Leah showed. And I think that really opened the eyes of the folks at DelDOT who are in charge of kind of working with Leah and planning these things. And I mean, you saw a real push to make something happen in terms of the project that Leah was talking about, the thing that she's working on now.
I know that the focus of the council is just cycling in general, not specifically cycling for older people specifically. Right. But I'd be curious to get your thoughts. From your perch as the chair of the Delaware Bicycle Council, do you think that seniors in Delaware have a special role to play?
Absolutely. So Leah talked about how the Sussex area is growing and continues to grow, and we know that that is senior citizens retiring to Delaware, and that's a national trend. We know that there's expected to be an increase in the population segment overall in the population of the United States in terms of the amount of people that fit into the senior citizen bracket. And we believe that that can help drive decisions that are made because people are going to listen to that group of people because they think that their opinions are important. An example of that is there's a community called the Villages that's in Florida. That's actually the fastest growing metropolitan area in the United States. I think there's 100,000 people there. So we're not there, but we know that that group of people can talk to their local representatives about political action, and that they also can talk to people about what kind of communities that they want to live in and how they want to get around in those communities.
So I mean, you have two perspectives here. You're the chair of the state commission, and you also work in the private sector as a civil engineer.
Right.
So maybe I don't know which of those backgrounds give you some sort of interesting perspective on politics. Is there something is politics an important thing for us all to be thinking about as we think about making Delaware a more bicycle-friendly place?
So I'll give an example. This example is not specifically about bicycles, but it is about transportation, and it is about a Sussex County community. We have a municipal client located in Sussex County, and it's a golf course community. So most of the people in that community get around in golf courses. And they actually got together and they went to this town, and it was debated in 2 town council meetings because they wanted to be able to drive their golf carts not only around the community, but around the town. And this was a serious discussion. I mean, this community's leadership took these people seriously, and I don't remember what the outcome was, but it was clear that people were listening to the message that I want to get around in my community in a different way that doesn't involve me driving my car.
Is there a trick here? It's not, if you want something done, your best bet maybe is not the letter to the editor or an email. Your first order of business is to be part of a larger group, so to make it clear to people in government that it's not just one cranky person, but it's actually something that is reflective of the communities that they represent and serve.
Yeah, I think I want to say that there's cycling related, I won't call them lobbying groups, but organizations throughout Sussex. I think each of the towns probably has a cycling related initiative going on right now. So those would be some initial contacts. A long time ago when I first started in this business, my boss told me that Delaware is unique because in Delaware, everybody knows the governor. So there's a real ability for people to connect with their local legislators here, and they definitely listen. I mean, this is a personal experience that my father-in-law lives in the area, and I know that they talk to them. There's groups like Sussex Cyclists who can help advance things as well. And I mean, all these kind of people are present at the Bicycle Council meetings. So that would be a place for people to understand what these groups are and how to connect with them.
So I'm not gonna hammer on this question, but it's something that we certainly care a lot about at Bike Delaware. So I'm just gonna tell one little thing that I often, sort of a question, and then something that I tell people, and I'll just repeat it here. So when people come to us at Bike Delaware and say, how do we make our community more bicycle friendly? Usually the question we ask first is, do you know the name of your state senator and state representative? That is usually the first question we ask those people. And 9 times out of 10, or maybe 98 times out of 100, we get either no, I don't know, or isn't it like Senator Carper, Senator Coons, I think is my senator, and we say no. Senator Carper and Senator Coons are your federal senators who represent you in Washington, D.C. But when it comes to making your community more bicycle friendly, and really a whole bunch of things related to quality of life, the most, you've got your local officials, but arguably the 2 most important people who represent you are your state senator and state representative. And if you don't know their names, you're going to have a hard time getting anywhere. That's like job 1. You need to know the names of the 2 people who represent you in Dover and can advocate for the kinds of changes you want to the critical decision makers in state government. So go ahead.
I was going to say, James, I think the other piece that we talk a lot about the political side, but Leah touched on a couple other things that were pretty important in terms of land development and planning, and that is if this is the kind of thing that people want to have, if they want to have this kind of community where they can get around easily in bicycles, or even just as pedestrians, then they need to they need to make the development community aware that that's what they want. These are the amenities that we want in our community. DelDOT's done a lot to try to incorporate cycling and multimodal pathways in development, but we're talking about things where your community that you're going to live in has the services nearby so that becomes easier instead of it being all spread out, like has historically been done because we all got around in cars for so long. So there's kind of the political side, and then there's the supply and demand side in terms of these are the kind of communities that we want to have. And the development community will respond to that because they want to sell houses to people in places where they want to live.
So we are getting close to the end of this panel. Leah, let me give you an opportunity here to Scott. We heard from Scott for 5 minutes or so. Does anything that little conversation I was having with Scott resonate with you, or is there anything you'd like to add?
Most definitely. I think public engagement around these sorts of projects is really incumbent upon all of us to kind of own. If we are in the world of realizing the benefits that biking and walking infrastructure can give to our communities, talk to your neighbor about it. Let them know that they can actually change the way their built environment works if they get involved, if they get engaged. And obviously, James, you mentioned state level representation. Also, you may have a city council, you may have a county council, you may have a town board. Those folks are often in the room and having conversations and may not know that there's a decent chunk of their population who really are beginning to see benefits to more bike-friendly infrastructure, more walking-friendly infrastructure. So if they don't hear from you, they don't know, and they're not able to represent your interests. So both at all levels of government, that is very important to reach out and make your voice heard.
That's so true. I mean, the cliche is, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but it's a little more than that. It's more than just being a squeaky wheel. If you can bring good ideas to elected officials, that's often the issue. That is often the choke point, the constraint. It's not that all these officials they're secret haters of cycling or cyclists or walking. They're like up to no good in the background. It's that they've got like 1,000 other things on their plate. This is not the thing that they're focused on. And if you can come to them and it's one thing to come to them and squeak, that's okay, maybe that's good, but like if you can come to them and say, here's how we can fix this, like here and like I've talked to our whole community of 50 people, and everybody I've talked to thinks this is a great idea. Here's a letter with all their names and we all think it's a great idea. Like, I've been doing this for 10 years. I'm telling you, the odds are pretty good that they're going to be like happy to hear you, like, especially if it's not just a squeak, but like you're actually bringing good ideas to the table.
Yeah. And one parting thought from me, we're on an AARP panel here. I cannot, if you're looking for a place to start, the resources that AARP has about livable communities, about the things we've been talking today are great. I use them professionally in my work on a weekly basis. And for those of you at home looking for a way to get involved in this work, that is a great place to start.
Wow. I feel like that should have been me saying, thank you. Thank you, Leah, for saying that. If there are no final comments, then just before we get off, I want to make sure to again mention the Amish Country Bike Tour virtual edition, which you can register for free. Look down, look right there across the bottom of your screen, for free using the code AARP 1002021. 1002021. That's open till the end of October. It's a great way to experience the same quiet and peaceful country back roads that have been a staple of the Amish Country Bike Tour for 35 years. But you just do them on your own. If you have a lot of fun, you can come back next year and do the one with I think we had over 2,400 people last Saturday, which is a record for the 35 years of the tour. That's telling us that something is working right, either with the tour or in Delaware or both. So again, thank you all, Scott Hoffman and Leah Casanda. We really appreciate you joining us today. And I think here's where we say goodbye.
Thanks, James.